Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose. And, even though I was a little bit disappointed by yesterday's state of play, Sony actually came out today with some really encouraging news that I was very happy to hear. This might speak a little bit to their new leadership. Sounds like they're going to implement a new strategy that's going to help them expand their pipeline of games, which is something that I've really wanted them to do these past few years. But I also think a part of this announcement speaks to their lack of competition in the HD console space. I think we're already seeing some of the early signs or just the results of Xbox's multi-platform decisions. So we're going to talk all about that today. Before we get started, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Just thank you so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's just go and get right into things, though, starting off with Avowed. This is Obsidian's next big RPG, and it launched into early access today with its full release plan for later this week. Now, if you've been curious about its quality, though, reviews just started to roll out. In fact, I actually posted my own review if you want to check it out. I do have a video for that on my channel. But however, if you look over on Metacritic, you'll see that it has an 80 overall score with 63 total reviews. And this actually lines up perfectly with the score that I gave it myself. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it has a lot of what makes a great RPG, and if you like Obsidian games, it has a lot of what you would expect from them. I talked about this in my review, but there are certain things that I think holds it back, most notably the grind that they kind of expect you to go through. Now, I hope they rebalance it with a later patch, because other than that, I think it's a really good RPG. If anything else, though, it's going to launch into Xbox Game Pass, so if you're curious, or if you just like RPGs, or if you like Obsidian, well, definitely check it out. Now, we also got an update from my favorite game from last year, being Astro Bot. I mean, I truly cannot praise this game, and really this team, enough. And that's exactly why I always get just so excited to hype it up just a little bit more. Well, today they announced 5 new levels that you can soon play for free. I mean, you can't beat free, and yeah, you can see here where they said, unlike our last update, Winter Wonder, which was a walk through the Christmas park, this new update features harder levels to test your jumping skills. Each level comes with a brand new special bot to rescue, and once that's done, it can be replayed in time attack mode with online rankings. To access these, you will need to have completed the main game. So sharpen those skills again, and let's get rescuing. Now, each of the 5 levels will release on a weekly basis, starting actually today on February 13th. Now, this also includes a PlayStation 5 Pro update that will increase the resolution, all while maintaining that buttery smooth 60 frames per second. Now, my only thing about this announcement, though, is that it just kind of drives me crazy that for whatever reason, they didn't reveal this at yesterday's PlayStation State of Play. I mean, I really don't understand Sony sometimes and what they're thinking, but yeah, there is a leak going around that Sony will launch an Astro Bot PS5 bundle at a later date. So, I mean, obviously, they do view this as an important game for them, and we're actually going to talk a little bit more about that in this next topic. Okay, so the big story today is Sony's quarterly results. It was very impressive, and we're going to circle back to that in a moment, but there was one thing that they talked about that not a lot of people have necessarily noticed yet, but this immediately caught my attention. Sony just highlighted the success of Astro Bot, which apparently has convinced them to invest in more family-friendly games. Now, they also mentioned Helldivers 2 for live service, but, I mean, nonetheless here, we talked a lot about this topic last year. The idea that Astro Bot is a way to send Sony a message that we still want these type of games. I mean, it's great to get those AAA blockbusters, don't get me wrong. But I think for a lot of us, it's important to have variety, and that's something that PlayStation has gone away from these past few years. I mean, really, this is pretty much the main reason that I've been so critical on their leadership. To me, it just does not feel like the Sony that I grew up with, because Jim Ryan and Herman Hulst shifted PlayStation towards, this kind of go big or go home mentality, and if not that, well, here's a live service game that none of us were really asking for in the first place. That's been Sony's 2 main priorities these past few years, and the problem with that is that it was at the detriment of these smaller, more creative games that's always helped Sony be special. It's also helped fill out their catalog in past years. So I just think that it's a shame. But I mean, Astro Bot was an opportunity for us fans to show support for, that more creative side of Sony. And apparently, we sent that message loud and clear. Astro Bot won Game of the Year and sold very well for Sony. It surpassed 1.5 million units sold last year as of November, and it's still growing. We know that it received a big boost after it won the Game of the Year at the Game Awards, and this would be what you would consider an evergreen title. So I think that it's actually going to reach around 4 to 5 million units over its lifetime, if not even more than that, which is very impressive for a 3D platformer, especially one that's not related to Mario. So big congrats to them for that, but I think this could already speak to Sony's new leadership. Herman Holst is no longer co-CEO, thankfully, and this new leadership is already seemingly listening to fans. They're not just looking at those go big or go home numbers, and that's a great sign for their future. Maybe we'll start to see the return of former Sony and less of this live service, go big or go home focus that we've been seeing. I mean, it'll be a while before we see the fruits of their labor. Games do take a long time to develop, but with this news, well, now suddenly, games like Sly Cooper, Jak and Daxter, Ape Escape, or any other family-friendly game, including new IP, feels a lot more realistic than it did yesterday. So, I mean, I know it's still early, but I want to be optimistic about their new leadership here. I'm really hoping that this is a good early sign for PlayStation. Now, as for the big announcement that everybody seems to be talking about, though, that's their sales update. Sony just announced that the PS5 exceeded their expectations over the holiday period as it went on to sell a whopping 9.5 million units, making it the best holiday period for the PlayStation 5 thus far. While talking about it, they said the console sold really well, more than we had expected. Much stronger momentum was felt. We have achieved a high level of penetration. For the next fiscal year, very strong titles, including first-party and third-party titles, are likely to be launched. So better momentum could be created for us to boost our sales for the next fiscal term. Now, they did mention strong first-party games, so, hopefully we get those announcements sooner rather than later. Let's get some official release dates out there. But it also sounds like they are expecting GTA 6 specifically to have a big impact on their sales numbers in 2025, which, yeah, they're probably 100% correct about. GTA 6 will be their single best opportunity to transition PS4 users to the PS5. And quite frankly, really Xbox One users as well. And that's something that I want to talk about when it comes to these results. Sony says that the PS5 exceeded their expectations. And we kind of know that this happened during a slower than usual holiday period for Sony. They didn't really have a lot of their big releases like they usually do. Now, maybe that's why they weren't necessarily expecting these type of results. But if you think about it, if you really think about it, it kind of makes sense. Okay, we could somewhat point to the PS5 Pro as some fans rebought a console, but I think it's also noteworthy that Sony doesn't have the same amount of competition that they've had in years prior. Before last year, if somebody wanted an HD home console, it was, do I want an Xbox or do I want a PlayStation? But in 2024, Xbox kind of made that question very simple for a lot of people. They're putting their games on PlayStation and they're indicating even more is to come. And despite the fact that they had exclusives last year, a lot of people are under their impression, again, because of Xbox's words, that those games and future Xbox exclusives will eventually come to the PlayStation 5. So when you look at these numbers for the PlayStation 5, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the decline of Xbox hardware and their new strategy. Microsoft seemingly sold a record low for the Xbox Series in 2024, while the PlayStation 5 sold at a record high. I don't think that that's necessarily a coincidence, and we could continue to see that in 2025. We were just talking about GTA 6, and I think there's a pretty good chance that the PS5 will have an even more impressive holiday this year, because it will be the default go-to option for a lot of consumers. It's going to be a place where you can get PlayStation games and also Xbox games when they decide to port them over. Now, that's just my personal take on this, but I think this could possibly be some of the results of less competition. Now, we also got some Switch 2 news thanks to a new patent that was discovered online. This might sound a little bit strange at first, but apparently this patent suggests that players may be able to turn their controllers upside down and plug them into the quote-unquote wrong side of the system. You can see here posted up by VGC. They said instead of reporting an error, the patent suggests that the Switch 2 could instead flip the display 180 degrees, essentially allowing the user to turn the system upside down. While this may not immediately seem like it would serve much of a purpose, the patent notes that because the Switch 2 only has one headphone port, players would therefore be able to decide whether to have it at the top or the bottom of their console, depending on their preference. So, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily a groundbreaking feature or anything like that, but it's still innovative, and if anything else, it gives gamers more choice. And I always view that as a good thing. I mean, we're going to talk about controller layouts here in just a moment, but the reality is that everybody has different preferences. It's just one of those things where I don't think there's really a right or wrong answer. And if you do prefer one layout over the other for the Switch 2, or at least in terms of its USB and audio jack ports, then this patent kind of indicates that you will have some amount of control in that regard. Now, let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, do you prefer an asymmetrical or a symmetrical controller layout? And the majority of you voted for asymmetrical, which is how Nintendo and Xbox likes to do things. A lot of people will argue that this is the better layout for shooters specifically, whereas symmetrical puts more emphasis on the D-pad. Now, honestly, though, and this is just my own opinion, but I really don't have an issue with either layout, just so long as the controller itself is comfortable. That's the most important thing to me. And right now, I do feel like all of the big three do have comfortable controllers. I mean, I don't really think the Joy-Cons in themselves are comfortable. They're very small and cramped, but the Pro Controller is really nice. I mean, the last time that I can recall a controller that I genuinely disliked was the PlayStation 3 controller, which is kind of ironic because that's one of my favorite consoles. So it just kind of goes to show you that wasn't because of its controller. I was still able to enjoy the PS3 just fine, but I do know that the asymmetrical design is very popular, and that seems to be the case even on PC. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, but until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.